We've been married for 14 years and have 3 school-age
Bet you guys have
children.
been
This is
married
every
14
week.
years.
Yes.
We have the same struggles helping our kids
Okay.
academically just like any other parent.
So we want to share what we've learned and invite experts to share with us so we can all learn together. Join us Tuesdays from 11 to noon
10,
in the
9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. Hello, welcome to School Days, Help for Moms and Dads of School-Age Kids. I'm Danita Bailey.
And I'm David Bailey.
So what do Albert Einstein, Steve Jobs, Walt Disney, and Oprah Winfrey have in common?
Oh, you asking me? I thought that was a rhetorical question. They're all rich,
They are all rich. That's not the answer.
but they are all rich.
Okay, but that's not the answer. Do
They've-
you want another guess?
They have failed.
Very good. Yes, they are all great failures and they're great at failing. So as parents, we want the best for our children and we hate to see them disappointed, but failure is not a 4-letter word. In fact, studies show that learning to deal with failure.
Oh, actually, it technically is.
What?
Fail.
Failure is not a 4-letter word.
Oh, but fail
I said
is.
failure.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Oh, but fail is.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's why I said failure.
Yeah, but fail is. Anyway,
Okay.
keep going.
So I'll start over again. In fact, studies show that learning to deal with failure is vital to a child's development. If our kids, and even we parents, learn to handle it well, it can be a stepping stone to greater achievement and a successful future.
Most of us have heard of helicopter parents. Now we have bulldozer parents. These parents forged ahead before their child, removing all obstacles and ensuring success at every turn. As you all know about the recent headlines of celebrities paying large sums of money to bribe their children's way into college, are perfect examples of this.
So let's strive to not be those parents, and I'm including us in that because you and I have been guilty of helicoptering a time or two, right? Okay, well, I'll own that. Just I have been guilty of helicoptering a time or two.
You are forgiven.
Okay. So anyway, stick around for tips to help your child well. So Dave, tell me about a time when you failed or even failed spectacularly.
Wow. Well, probably one of my biggest challenges I had was, as some of you know my story, I, coming out of high school, well, starting in 8th grade, I wanted to go to the U.S. Air Force Academy because I wanted to be a pilot. So I worked my way hard through school, but then it was time to take the SATs my junior year. So I took the SATs, here we go, once, twice, 3 times. Wait, there's more.
No.
Oh, wow, you bring in some Commodores, huh?
Mhm.
Wow. 4, I took the SATs 5 times in high school, and I still didn't get the score I needed. I was short by 10 points.
10 points.
10 points. Yes, and so that led to me getting accepted into their preparatory school, and I went to the Air Force Academy Prep School for a year. Ironically, while I was there, I got accepted on my ACT scores. So what I went there to take it for, I never got it. I got it on my ACT scores, and then I got there, and I needed eyeglasses along the way, and I couldn't fly, and ended up leaving, even though I got accepted into the academy, which was, that was, I learned, I messed up, I overcame, then I realized it wasn't for me, and then I left. I remember people thought when I came back that I was a failure for coming back. I'm like, no, it was my choice. I chose to come back. So, and I didn't pass my driver's license exam. I also missed that. I failed that 5 times. So 5 seems to be a theme.
Gosh.
Yeah, 5 is a theme of failure in my
This is a
life.
good thing to know about you.
Yeah, yeah. I couldn't parallel park to save my life. So anyway, I've had a lot of failure. You don't want me flying your plane.
Ugh.
But I'm pretty good. Hey, thank God for cameras. I wish I had that backup camera. I wish that would have made it easy back then if I had a backup camera when I was trying to parallel park.
Yes, that would have been easy.
Anyway, I've had a lot of failure in my life. How about you, babe?
Well, I was just going to share something. Have you ever heard of the Apple product called Apple Newton Message Pro? Or Message Pad, actually.
No, say that fast.
Apple Newton Message. It's the Apple Newton message pad.
I have not.
Right. No, you haven't, because most people have not heard of this. This came out in 1993. It was one of the first PDAs. It was actually $1,100 adjusted for inflation.
Public display of affection.
No.
No. Oh.
What is it? Personal data assistant.
Okay.
I think it was what it was. And anyway, it was a big flop. Had low sales, lots of glitches. Although they were super, super excited about it before it launched, and then it launched, and it was a big wah wah. But
How'd that go?
Wah wah.
Okay.
But what it did was they learned. They dusted themselves off, and it paved the way for iPhones and iPads. But
Wow.
it was a spectacular failure.
Wow.
Yeah. So anyway, we are excited about today's show, and we are talking about teaching your children to fail well. But before we go any further, let me just say that it does take a village. If you hear a great parenting tip or nugget of advice, share it with your parent friends. Facebook it, Instagram it, tweet it, link it in, and add the hashtag SchoolDazedShow and I am School Days. And also, we want you to be a part of the show. So if you have any questions or comments, give us a call at 214-431-5062. So who do we have with us today?
So today we have Jorge Gama. Jorge is a licensed professional counselor and an honors graduate from Texas Wesleyan University. He completed his undergraduate from the University of Texas, Arlington in psychology and Spanish. Jorge works with a range of emotional and behavioral issues, providing services that span from therapy for depression and grief counseling to parenting support. Jorge M. Gama, LPCS, is Mending Clinic's clinical director and Restore Advanced Outpatient Program. Restore was built from Jorge's vision in 2015 when he noticed a gap in the mental health field for his clients who weren't dealing with substance abuse as their primary conflict. Through empowering and growing each Restore participant, Jorge believes each success becomes a ripple that extends beyond Mending Clinic and the DFW Metroplex. So thank you for coming, Jorge. We're very, very grateful. Jorge, if you guys don't know, they've shared a lot of our guests we've had prior. Probably at least half of our episodes have come from
A good
Jorge.
number of them.
Yeah, so now we got Jorge in the flesh here. So we're really, yes, the mastermind behind School Dazed.
And what else?
Yes. Oh, you don't gotta smack it. Goodness. And I'm trying to introduce the man. I'm trying to hype him up. Okay. And Jorge will be giving away one of these. Hit it, babe.
Let's see, where's my camera?
We're waiting here.
Okay.
Okay, we're on the clock here, babe.
Oh, this is good.
Yes.
He's also wearing it. I don't know where the camera is.
Yes. Yes, it's on him right now. All right.
Okay.
So the Mending Clinic shirts and it says Restore Hope. To enter into the drawing, do one of the following. Share our Facebook Live of this show with the hashtags School Dazed Show and Restoring Hope in your post, or tag 2 friends in a post on Facebook Live. You can find us at Facebook at Noggin Foundation.
All right. So we ate up about 10 minutes there, Dave. So let's jump right in. So Jorge, tell us why this is such a passion of yours.
So I've been in counseling 10 years now, since I graduated, and just looking at the pain and looking at the hurt that people go through, and looking at trying to restore hope to people's lives. People can survive with depression, with anxiety. They can survive with so many other illnesses, medical illnesses. But once hope is gone, then it's very difficult to continue to live and to move forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So, just in researching for the show, I came across quite a lot of information. And so tell me why failure is critical in a child for brain development.
Yeah, so there's, without getting too nerd out or geeky, there's words that we use. There's, brain atrophy, which means some of the brain, stems they they disintegrate, and then there's plasticity. And so when you look at plasticity, you're looking at new patterns that are being created in our brain. And so when a kid fails, from there, failing safely and failing forward is very important, because they start growing those neuronal networks to actually be able to succeed down the road.
And what do you mean by failing safely?
So, just as little kids, when they fall or they have a tantrum, as parents, we really have to regulate ourselves, because at the moment that a kid has a tantrum and we aren't able to regulate ourselves, now it's about us, and it's not about the kid, and it's not about helping the child really grow that ability, that resiliency to move forward from that failure.
Gotcha. And failing forward?
Yes.
Is it the same thing, or?
That's the same thing.
Oh,
That's
okay.
exactly what failing forward is. So
Yeah.
it's a safety of failing, right? And so you guys had some awesome people on there that talked about how they failed. And, I really believe that failing is the answer to success, or like no is the way to yes. And really looking at moving, not giving up, building that resiliency, building that grit to get you where you want to get.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what shift in our culture has caused this lack of ability to handle failure?
That's a really good question. So I think there's a couple of things that I see. There's a term that you guys have probably heard, failure to launch, right? And that term just never sat well with me. One of it being that it was mainstream. And anytime I see something that's mainstream that gets really catchy and gets caught on, I always kind of question it. Like, what's going on? Why is it so popular? And what I would really encourage you to think about is, there's really a failure to ignite. And here's what I mean by that. There's a failure to ignite passion. There's a failure to ignite resiliency. There's a failure to help kids really take on ownership on the things that they're doing. And so when that happens, they don't have the ability to really have foresight to move forward. And so that then becomes a ripple effect and starts affecting just our society.
One of the things I have observed as a little bit frustrating for me is that everybody gets a trophy now. So back in the day, if you won, and you got your award. But now, like, we just came from our daughter's kindergarten ceremony, and yesterday was our second graders, and everybody gets a participation certificate, which is nice, and I understand why they do it, because they don't want anybody to feel left out.
Right.
But that means that, we're growing up in a society of kids that feel like if I show up, then I get something.
Yeah.
I don't have to work my hardest necessarily, and I can mess around, and I still am going to get my participation award.
Right.
And I think that's troublesome for and helps us not to be able to accept failure and accept no in the future.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
So think about what that does, right? So when everybody gets a trophy, everybody gets a certificate, there's no desire, there's no there's no reason why to put forth any effort. And so what happens is we end up teaching our kids to be complacent. We teach them to regress to the mean, right? I mean,
Mediocrity?
Mediocrity, exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
And so, like, not to bash the school system, but it's designed around regressing to the mean. And so what does that mean? It means that even kids that are up high and kids that are below, they have to be in the middle. And so they study that, and this is where they bring them to. And so if we were able to maybe look at the ones that are a little bit more up here, then we can bring that mean up a little bit, which would challenge the kids. And really what we want to do is help the kids internalize those victories, right? So those failures, once they move forward and they move past it, then they can internalize that victory.
I agree. I want to know what kind of shift in parenting style has impacted our kids' ability, because I know, and I can tell from the grandparents' reaction sometime to our parenting, they did things a whole lot different. I mean, I just know when we were smaller, we would just leave. We'd just be gone
Right.
for the day. And just, okay, we'll come back when the light comes on. I never heard that, but I know you did, didn't you?
No. I've heard people say that. I didn't have to.
Oh, I thought I heard you say that.
No. But
did your parents know where you were 24/7?
No,
Right.
I was out. I'd be gone, and I'd come back when I came back. And,
Right.
And it was no big deal.
So how's we don't do that now. I can't even imagine not knowing where my kids are for hours. So how's that impacted us?
Well, I think really looking at like you said, the parenting styles, what has shifted is I think there's a pretty profound competitive mindset that we have, right? We heard about keeping up with the Joneses. And the interesting thing is the more that I look at the parent structure with the kids, at first I kind of felt like, okay, so they're just wanting to be friends with their kids and they want to make sure that their kids are okay. But really what we're looking at is this competition with parents. And it's almost like I'm going to out-service my kid. Like, I'm going to out-service my kid however you're serving your kid. And so it's a competition with the parents. And we really have to look at the parents being able to take a step back and say, you know what, I'm going to be countercultural and I'm not going to do what everybody else is doing. I'm going to do what I feel is best for our kid. And I think that's where the shift has come in, where before we didn't do what was, there's always peer pressure, it's real. But it seemed like parents didn't cave into that as much as they do now with Facebook and with social media. Now everything's got to be up there. Everything, if it doesn't happen on Facebook, then it's not real.
Right.
And so that creates a standard for parents that are now competing with other parents. And the way that they compete is to service their kids.
Oh my gosh. So I had never even considered that. That's a very good point. I mean, back in the day, if you were helicoptering your kid, then it would be frowned upon by other parents. So, but now it's something that we need to do, that's expected at least. And so we are competing with one another to be a better parent.
Yeah.
That's so crazy.
I've noticed that, when I taught, I taught two different types of classes. I taught the general ed classes, and I taught the pre-AP classes. And depending upon what district I was in, sometimes you had to test into the more rigorous courses, and sometimes you could just enroll your child in. And I had kids in pre-AP courses that had no business being in a pre-AP course, but it was the status. Right. Of my child is an all pre-AP. Well, because it seems like, if you're not an all pre-AP, then there's something, that's not cool or something. But I'm like,
what's wrong with your kid?
Right.
And then that reflects what's wrong with you.
Right. But it's like, you can't even multiply. Why are you in pre-AP courses? But then at the same time, I had kids who were not in pre-AP courses that should have been in pre-AP courses. Right. And I would encourage them, and I encourage their parents as well. Then sometimes parents would say, "Oh, I don't know," So just that fear of I don't know if the work gets harder or more challenging, then I don't know if I'm going to be able to handle it. Right. So it's just an interesting phenomenon. Going on there. Yeah.
So you mentioned social media. How has that shift in our society impacted fear of failure and handling failure? Yeah.
So I think social media. So if we think about what social media is, right? Social media is put on a filter, put on a smile, get the likes, get the shares, but it's empty. And so if you think about our kids nowadays are spending 6 and 8 and 10 hours on social media, which is an empty vessel, it's only a matter of time before they internalize that emptiness. And so that then starts breeding into everything of their life. And we look at that, inability to problem solve. We look at just feeling like they can't, do anything. They look at the life as doom and gloom because they've internalized all this. And so that in itself creates some anxiety. So what the research is saying is kids are having anxiety, first signs of anxiety from about 6 years old. And they're starting to get treated, somewhere around 10 years old. And so we're talking about already 4 years of kiddos that have been struggling with anxiety that they haven't talked to anybody about. And so with the parents continuously competing, then that can really put a lot of pressure on the kiddos. And a lot of times what we see is more is caught than taught, right? And so, they catch the parents competing, and they catch the parents, saying these things. We know by the age of 4 if a child is guilt prone in their conversation or shame prone. And the difference is that guilt prone is, I made a mistake. Shame prone is I am a mistake. And so we have to really be careful with that language that we use. And that's why I was saying fail safely helps to fail forward. Right. And so when they fail as little kids and they're having tantrums, we have to regulate ourselves because we are the parents to then reflect and show our kids, hey, these are the things this is how you regulate yourself to move forward. And that's a skill set that helps with success down the road.
Because, gosh, they want to be us. I mean, I watch Christina. She even wants to brush her teeth like I brush my teeth. I mean, literally that. So modeling for our kids is so important, and just they're paying attention even when we don't think that we're paying attention.
Yes.
Yeah. So I came across this great documentary on Netflix called Take Your Pills. I think that's what it's called.
Okay.
But anyway, it talks about how there's a trend with older students who are under so much pressure or putting pressure on themselves that they are taking ADHD medication that's not prescribed to them. So talk about what that's all about.
Yeah, that is a real thing. You're looking at, college and med school, and they have to perform, and they have to be up, and they have to be awake. And again, a lot of that are messages that they heard growing up. Again, more is caught than taught, right? And so the parents saying certain things or acting a certain way that, ends up creating, this kid has an interpretation of, this is what I'm supposed to do. This is how I'm supposed to do it no matter what. And so, again, looking at, a kid when he's in school and he's developing, it's really focusing on their strengths and helping them build on that. I know a lot of times people go, oh, well, what are they weakest at? And that's what we have to grow. And yeah, we have to grow that, but not at the cost of their strengths, because now, again, that regression to the mean, right? So now in things that they can grow and build upon, they're not building upon that because they're super focused on the things that they're not as strong in. One of the other things in regards to what you're talking about is, I think if parents understood that parenting is an infinite game and not a finite game. And here's what I mean by that. When you play parenting as a finite game, then every single little decision that you make, you feel it's going to be pass or fail. And so now the kid now incorporates that into their day-to-day life. But if you play a finite game, then you know that if you've made more healthier decisions than some of those negative ones, then there's a higher probability that your child is going to be healthy. And so letting them create their own self-esteem, letting them grow their own self-worth through knowing that this is an infinite game.
And I think that we as parents believe the scary story. So we look at something and they failed, whatever, and we start to imagine their futures of them
Their
not
life
doing
is ruined
well
in kindergarten.
Right.
Yeah, we have to realize that it's an ongoing process, and that we are going to make mistakes because we're not perfect people.
Right.
But we can recover from those things, and our kids are resilient and can recover from them. And just because they didn't get the perfect attendance reward in kindergarten or whatever,
right,
does not mean that they're not going to go to college or
yeah,
things like that.
It's interesting. I was just talking with someone. I'm working with a student at a school during the day, and she was talking about how she kind of graduated in the middle of her class, and she was kind of overlooked. So there's a lot of focus on the top students, on the bottom students, but kind of the kids in the middle are just kind of overlooked. But she is now working on getting she's about to wrap up and get her PhD. But someone she said that was in her class was a top 10 student, flunked out of college. But how her going through and her perseverance, she was able to get through it, and someone who you would have thought, clearly the people at the top are going to, go on to do these types of things, and someone in the middle, maybe not. But she's getting her doctorate now, and so just seeing how going through someone who you may have thought as being she played, and she's in her 50s now, but she's getting it,
Right.
And so that was just, she was just encouraging us just to say, don't necessarily count out people that you may overlook, because
Right.
they're the ones that may end up rising to, a lot of times some of the wealthiest people in the world are not the smartest people in the world.
Right.
So it's an interesting observation that I'm seeing.
Yeah, and 100% agree, and I've seen that in my life. Growing up, I grew up in National City in California, which is predominantly Hispanic, residents that live there.
Uh-huh.
And, it was normal to finish school and go into a trade, which there's nothing wrong with a
Yeah.
trade, right? But I remember talking to my school counselor and her saying, oh, well, what do you want to do? And I'm like, I want to be a psychologist. That's what I want to do. And her saying, well, let's look at something a little bit more realistic.
Oh.
Like, maybe an electrician, maybe a plumber. Now, to her defense, I do have ADD. Back then I had ADHD, but as you get older, the age drops. And so, the hyperactivity, it was prime time for me in high school. So I kind of, I'll give her a little bit of grace.
Right.
It was prime time. But it wasn't until I, came up against myself and said, okay, well, what is it that I want to do? So I also played baseball growing up. And that's another thing that I think athletes a lot of times get not overlooked necessarily, but there is kind of a blind eye turned, because if you're good, then the teachers just kind of, they help you out, right?
Yeah.
And that was with me. And so when I got hurt and I could no longer play baseball, then it was like, okay, I've got to do this. Like, I've got to do it for me. And that's when
you didn't have a free pass anymore.
Nope, not anymore.
Exactly. Wow. I'm just has me thinking about how sometimes lowering the bar can how does that impact someone's ability to overcome if the expectations are lowered for you by either your parents or lowered for you by society, or even lowered by yourself. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we can be our own worst enemy as far as what we believe that we can achieve. Yeah. I know this isn't off. Here we go with my off the script question, but how do lowered expectations feed into failure?
Yeah. So I'm gonna I actually my good friend Stacy Hayhurst, I asked her if I could use a story that her and I had talked about as an example, and this kind of plays right into what you're talking about. And so her son is graduating high school and he's about to go to college. And my wife Amanda, her and I sat down and we were just kind of having a conversation, catching up. And she was telling us, she said, I told my son, hey, now that you're not playing football, right? You chose not to play this season, or it was over. So now your job is you have to get a job and you have to finish school. And so she said, the first weekend he didn't know if like I was serious or not. But when his truck didn't have gas and when he didn't have money in his pocket to go with his friends to the movies, that failure right there for him to have to stay home and kind of bear that, like that really helped him go, okay, I'm going to go get me a job. Right. And I'm going to go and do this so I can have that in my pocket to be able to move forward. And so it's little things like that it's more of a character that you're trying to build, right? Because if you build a character of grit, it doesn't matter what's in front of somebody. They're going to overcome. Yeah. And the way that we're designed is we're going to adapt. And so if we're being taught to not work hard and we're being taught to get a trophy for doing nothing, we're going to adapt to that.
Yeah.
If we're challenged and we're grown and we're watered and we're nourished, and then we're going to grow in that way. We're going to adapt to that and we're going to want to move forward.
Yeah. You mentioned a word that's one of my favorite new words, grit, and growth mindset. Tell us what growth mindset is.
So growth mindset is just knowing the other term that I like with that is emotional agility. Right. And so here's what emotional agility means. It knows that, or we know that there's a level of differentiation. So there's a little bit of space between, let's say, our failure or our success and us. And so that doesn't define us. That's a work that's been done. And so a growth mindset is somebody that has the ability to change and to maneuver and to adapt to what's going on. A fixed mindset, it's somebody that is just kind of really stuck in their ways. They can't really move forward. And you see that with some kids. You see it really young. Some kids just like a pattern. They like a routine. And so helping them move past that, helping them have, some freedom within the limits is really good for them. Again, that's safety, right? So we're going to create some change. We're going to create maybe a little bit of a different schedule, and then let's work through it. And really talking to the kids. I think one of the things that we do a lot as parents is we talk to them, not talk with them. And so it's really important to talk with them to be able for them to then internalize that and say, okay, so here's the things that I have to do to be able to move forward.
This has me thinking about when I had students in the classroom and they finally hit that wall where maybe they were an all-A student. And then they started dipping into the B realm. And I would see the parents swoop in and say, my child does not get B's. And I'm kind of like, well, yeah, they do. because, I mean, it's like, this is like, how could my child, it was almost like an indictment against me. Like, what did you do to allow this to happen? And so, I have to kind of lay out what's been happening in the class, and then they get a better understanding of what the way it's been. Also, or another point is sometimes students would get to a point where all their successes were based upon their natural talent,
right?
And they didn't need to develop any skill. They didn't need to invest time studying.
Yeah.
So a lot of my private clients are because their children came from this environment. Now their grades are starting to slip, and so now it's like, okay, we have to show you skills beyond just showing up and you having it in your head instantly. You have to actually now apply yourself. Right. So I've seen it both ways. I've seen it where standards have been lowered, but also parents are like, how could this be? So can you talk to us just kind of about that and how that could hinder children's ability to grow and have success?
Well, in that situation, I think the first conversation with the parent has to be with the kid, not with the teacher, right?
Yeah.
And really leaning into that kid and having that, whether it's a teenager or if it's an elementary school kid, to kind of figure out what's going on. One of the things that I really encourage parents to look at is what I call red flags, right? So if there's a deviation of character, there's a deviation of temperament, there's a deviation in the grades, then okay, what is going on?
Yeah.
And so talking to their child and trying to figure out what's going on. And a lot of times it's not even the actual class itself. It's, peer pressure, or it's social pressure, or it's other things going on. Sometimes, it's a parents not putting the boundaries in place and saying, hey, by 9, you got to be off your phone or you have to be in bed. That then is hindering their time to actually study and understand the subjects. Yeah.
I've seen students who didn't meet their potential. Actually, I just went to the 8th grade graduation of a group of kids that I had a couple years ago, and had a girl. She was very bright in there, but she was trying to fit into the middle. But last night she got the all A award, and so she finally realized. I had other girls who were just clowning and trying to fit in, and now got an award in mathematics. And if you would have seen this girl 2 years ago in my class, she was like queen clown, and so it's just amazing how as they realize, to your point of owning up to what can I do, kind of silencing the noise around them. One girl, she said, my friends I used to hang out with, I stopped hanging out with them. They were pulling me down, and I just got serious. And so that just brought so much joy to me to see these kids meet their potential of what they could be, by moving up. So, yeah.
And I think what you bring up, that potential, I think as a parent, we have to be realistic with that potential and helping, the child reach their potential, and maybe even challenging them to get a little bit further. But again, we have to take off this is my child and I know this is their potential. We have to really look at the child, for where they're at and their emotional maturity, because we see a difference today with the biological age and the emotional age. And so we see these 15 and 17 and 25 and 35-year-olds that their emotional age is of a 13, 14, 15-year-old. And so if we see that, then we know that potential is different than somebody that has their emotional age that's coherent, right?
Yeah.
35 and 35. And so, but that doesn't mean that they can't grow. It doesn't mean that emotional gap can't be closed to really help them reach their full potential.
Yeah.
So let's just take a quick break right now to say that if you have any questions or comments, please give us a call at 214-431-5062. We're talking to Jorge Gama from Mendon Clinic about helping your child fail well. So Jorge, can you explain what the iceberg analogy is and how it would help in helping our kids fail well?
Yeah, definitely. I think we want to focus on the bottom part. So the iceberg analogy is you have an iceberg and then there's a water, and then what you see is up here, but what's really going on is down here. And so I think looking at our kids and seeing not necessarily what people want to see, but what is it that we're cultivating or growing under the surface is what's important, because we want to raise good adults, right? We want to raise great adults. We don't want to raise great kids. And so when we look at that process, and if we're looking at, oh, my kid and my kid and my kid and my kid, that's great, but we really want to give them the skill set. We want to give them the ability to be great adults, to be productive adults as they get older. And so if we focus on just the surface part and what people are seeing or what we're seeing, then that doesn't really give us an accurate reading of our child, and it doesn't give them an accurate chance to really grow to their full potential. And so we really have to look under the surface and see what's cultivating, what's growing, and what's not. And we have to invest in growing that.
Right, and we as parents are called to plant seeds and water the seeds.
Yes.
And so there's so much that's happening that's behind the scenes or under the water, as you would say.
Yeah.
Another way I like to look at the iceberg analogy is we see people that have success, but there's a lot that happened before that. There's a lot that came, a lot of hard work, a lot of determination, a lot of long hours and things like that that built that person up to be successful. Right. And sometimes we live in this Facebook, Instagram, Twitter world where we see all the pretty pictures, right, and we see all the successes and all the awards and stuff like that. But what we don't see is what came before that and the reason why we can see the pretty pictures and things like that. So right, that's something that I try to instill in our kids, is to understand that it's not instant with, this instant society that we live in. It's not, there's a lot of hard work that goes into what we see.
When going back to like electronics and social media, I'm not saying that they're a bad thing. They just have to be limited, because when you have a screen in front of you, it doesn't help you develop neuronal networks that help you understand social cues, that help you understand like social rules, that help you understand how to talk to somebody in an interview, to look at them in the eyes. Those, they don't get developed. Partly is because you're inside or you're away from people, so you don't have that practice. Mm-hmm. The other part is that in our brain, it doesn't get developed. And so being in front of people and talking to them and being able to connect helps our brain actually develop.
Mm-hmm. That's good.
So what effect has students not coping well with failure had on mental health?
I think looking at mental health, it goes back to the shame and the guilt, right? And so when kids don't cope well with failure, they tend to internalize that. And so I'm going to go back to like even, adolescents and, even infants. I have a 2.5-year-old that's going to be 3 in July, and he had his end of the year program. Mm-hmm. And so during the Christmas, he was up there, he was, kind of quiet and reserved, and he was off to the side. But this time when he was going, he's a really good negotiator. He's like, hey, Dad, hey, Mom, can we go get some ice cream and sushi and like not go, to the show? And we're like, sorry, bud, we got to go. And so he's sitting there and he goes, well, what about just ice cream? Can we just go get some ice cream and not go to the show? Well, one of the things that we noticed, we just asked him, like, so he's 2.5, going to be 3, like, bud, are you a little nervous? And he's like, yeah. Are you scared to be up there? And he's like, yeah. And so we said, you know what, bud, we believe in you. We know that you can do this. You are courageous. You can do this. And so he went up there. He did fine. Well, after we went to go get ice cream to reward him, and we were sitting down, and he said, Daddy, are you proud of me? And, he's almost 3. And so I'm like, yes, son, I am, And then he asked my wife, Mom, are you proud of me? And he's like, yeah. And he says, I was courageous.
Oh,
wow.
And so we're talking about speaking, since they're little kids, speaking this into them to help them understand that, hey, you know what? If last time it wasn't great, it's okay. This is a process. We're going to continue to move forward. And so when we have, again, back to that infinite mindset to the finite, right?
Yeah.
And so if we teach our children to think in finite ways, then they're going to think anytime that they fail that it's a personal attack on them, right? And that then creates depression, or creates anxiety, or it creates a feeling of hopelessness or helplessness.
Yeah. Did you have a follow-up to that? 'Cause we had a question on Facebook.
Okay.
Okay. When children... Oh, it went away. Hold on. When children fail and we want them to fail in a safe place, how can we as parents punish bad behavior and help mold our... I'm sorry, it keeps going away. Help mold our children in a productive way?
Yeah. So that's definitely an age-related question, right? And so the younger they are, the more explaining that you have to do. And even when they get older, you have to do more explaining. But it's making those connections, right? And the connections have to be, like, the punishment has to fit the crime. And so when you look at it, at a young child, let's say, from 3 and above, from 3 to, let's look at maybe 5 or 6, right? We want to make sure that the punishment isn't so long that they don't understand it's a punishment, right? So now I'm just going to sit on
what they did at this point.
Exactly, right? But that holds true through life, right? It holds through till you're getting older. And so, if your son or daughter are, they have a curfew of 10 o'clock, right? And they get home at 10:15, well, now they owe you 15 minutes. So the curfew tomorrow is 9:45.
Oh, that's good.
Right. So the punishment has to fit the crime. And that's at every age level. The other thing that's important about that is we have to understand that we are our children's authority figures, but not forever. And so when they're about 13 or 14, we more want to be consultants in their lives. And here's what I mean by that. So social pressure is real, right? Kids are going to influence our kids, no matter how much we try to keep them away. And so understanding that what we're trying to do is raise them to the point where they can think on their own and they can internalize those thoughts and understand that, hey, just because you don't agree with me doesn't mean I'm wrong, right? Because there's that pressure. And so when about 13 or 14, if you can more be alongside them, by that point, they should have probably about 90% of the ability, 90% to be able to make any decisions in their life.
Oh,
right?
wow. By 13?
Probably 13 or 14, yes. So right around 11, we look at the abstract thinking. So from there on, we're just shaping. We're just continuously shaping and helping them continue to move forward, right? So as parents, that's what we want to shoot for. So since they're little, we want to look at when they're teenagers and when they're adults, and we want to start shaping them as they get older.
That's awesome.
Some of the pressure that kids can feel sometimes, especially academically, can come from parents. What's that fine balance between helping our children to do what we know they can do, but then letting them also to fail at times and suffer the real consequence of the choices that they've made? Sometimes we want to protect them from some things, but sometimes, so what's the balance between those?
Yeah. So, and again, this is like all age dependent, right?
Right.
So we'll start when they're, when they're little. So when they're littles, if they don't do their homework or they have a tantrum, then it's saying, hey, Johnny, if you don't do this, then you're not going to be able to go to the school field trip or whatever it is, right? If you don't get whatever it is you're going to get. And then it's reminding them, right? Like helping them understand, like, okay, so why are you not going? Well, because I didn't do this, right? So it isn't because mama said I couldn't or because dada said I couldn't, or, it's because I didn't do this.
Own it.
Yeah.
You have to own that. Now, as they get older, it goes back to telling them what the expectations are, because teenagers should know their parents like a book, and they really do. Because they know how to manipulate, they know what to say, they know what not to say, they know when to say it, right? And they know when to throw the bomb and just sit back and be like, oh, watch, mom and dad are going to go at it, and then I'm going to get my way. It's going to be all good, right? And so it's really, really important for parents to stay on the same team. Very, very, very important. And so, again, they have to know the parents like a book, right? So if I do A, my parents are going to do B, and then I'm going to get C. Like, I know that already. So the kids have to have that ingrained in their mind. If they don't, then those repercussions are not going to help them grow. They're just going to be kind of out floundering, and they're going to go, oh, well, maybe we'll get this or maybe we'll get that. No, kids have to know exactly what's going to happen if they do whatever they're going to do.
And they can only know that from consistency, from
Yes.
going through with what you say you're going to do,
Yeah.
which can be hard because we get tired
Yeah.
and sometimes lazy
Yeah.
and sometimes just feel guilty because we just want the kid to go on the field trip. And we're like, oh, it was to the Natural Museum of Science,
Yeah.
you know? But we've got to be consistent. That's a great point, that they should know for sure, I do this and I'm going to get this by the time they're teenagers. Yeah.
Yeah, 'cause even my 11-year-old, he'll say something like, "But I know what you're gonna say, Dad." Like, good,
Yeah,
Right.
That's
right? Because you know me, you know,
We've
you
been
know,
here before.
right,
Yep,
right, yeah.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
We have another Facebook question. What are practical methods to help a child learn that it is okay to fail, specifically on tests and evaluations?
That's really good. I think, and again, it's all age appropriate, right? But I think talking to the child, and you'll be surprised how many kids, if you say, did you try your hardest? And just asking them, like, so tell me about, what happened. Like, so you got a C or you got a D. Tell me what's going on. So just really leaning into them and trying to figure out their world. One of the things that happens, I think, nowadays more than ever is kids will isolate. They'll move into, they'll be in their bedroom and they'll be away from people. And so when you go in there and you say, hey, I've noticed that you've been in your room more often than normal. I just want you to know that I'm here. Their brain then says, oh, okay, so they're paying attention, so they must care. So it's the same thing with the grades. If they fail, it's really talking to them and saying, okay, what's going on? Did you not study? What happened? If they say, no, I studied, a lot, and I put the time in, then maybe we have to look at some help. Maybe there's something else that kid, maybe they need to contact Noggin and get
Noggin educational coaching. That's right.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I mean,
Shameless plug right there.
Yeah, but it's true. It's really looking at their child. And again, it isn't, one of the things that I hear a lot is, oh man, if I go to the doctor, they're going to tell me something's wrong, right? Well, if you know what's wrong, at least you know what you're working with. So if they have dyslexia or they have ADHD or, there's some kind of cognitive processy, dysfunction that's going on, then we need to get them some help. But again, it's really leaning into them and asking them, how, so, do you feel like you studied, as much as you should have? And you'll be surprised at how often kids are pretty honest about it, and they'll say, no, I didn't. Okay, well, let's work on that. So again, it's working on the character. Right now, that doesn't mean that, if there's any repercussions, it doesn't mean they go away. Like, oh, just because you understood that you did wrong doesn't mean that the repercussions go away.
Right.
You still have to, pay for the crime.
Right, right. I know in schools, a lot of times when students fail, this is a newer phenomenon is, if you get below a 70, that you make corrections, that you can make corrections up to a 70, so the kids can pass. Where back in the day,
You just got it.
you failed and it was what it was.
That was it.
There's something to. I think there is something to that. I think it's good in the sense is it doesn't let kids just not be held accountable for what they did. One other level, though, is what I would do, and this was something, shout out to Matt Brown at Donna Shepherd. He was really big on not just the kids who got below a 70, but anyone who got anything less than 100, because what happens is when students get problems wrong, let's say they get 3 problems wrong on a test. Well, let's say you take 4 tests in a semester. That's 12 concepts now that they have not really mastered. So now the mentality is, well, if I, pass and I don't need to grow anymore. I don't need to get better. I don't need to find out what my mistakes are. And so I was really big on making sure that everyone make corrections to their mistakes so they can see where their weaknesses were.
Right.
Because if they don't, then they'll make those same mistakes again on the semester exam or on the state exams as well. So what are your thoughts on that?
So, and this kind of goes back to the question that somebody asked on Facebook, this is focusing on the process, not the outcome.
Right.
Right. And so when we focus on the outcome, the thought process is it doesn't matter how I get it. It doesn't matter what I do or don't do. As long as I get that grade, then that's all that matters.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if we focus on the process, if we focus on the kids understanding the concepts, if we focus on them really learning and making them a part of their mindset, the outcome's going to happen.
Right.
So as long as you focus on the process,
The
you'll
process.
get the outcome that you want.
Process is more important than the outcomes.
Yeah. And it sounds like that's what the gentleman at Donald Shepherd is doing, is he's saying, hey, let's make sure that you understand these concepts, right? Let's make sure that you get the practice or you get what you need. That way the outcome of you understanding the concepts is going to be done. So we focus on the process, we focus on the work, we focus on the practice, and then you'll get the outcome.
Yeah. And my kids, they were so mad at me, but I passed. Well, I don't care if you pass. You still got some problems wrong, and we're going to fix it, you know. But it was, and it raised overall outcomes later on during the school year as a result of everyone, not just those that were failing, but everyone knew that they had to make corrections as well. And I was thorough. I said, you have to break it down. Don't just say because why did you get it wrong? Because I didn't get it right. Well, I know that, but really think through it, and I had to make them to think about it, you know, which was good because sometimes they never thought about it before, you know. So it was that was very interesting. That was an evolution in how we worked with corrections and fixing things that we've made wrong in the past.
Yeah, it's focusing on that process, right? It's saying, hey, you know, you have a math problem, and you have some kids that are really smart, right? And they can just look at it and put it down, and you say, no, we want to see the process. Well, it isn't just to be, you know, a pain in their neck, but it's to know the process. And if you think about that, that's really a life lesson. It's really looking at the process of life. It goes back to the infinite versus finite, right?
Right.
I mean, if we know it's a process and it's an infinite game, and we know that stuff's going to happen, but we can, you know, continue to move forward.
Yeah.
Well, in like our last minute, can you just tell us what are some of the mistakes that we make as parents that keep our kids from failing well?
Yeah, I think it's, I mean, obviously controlling, we talk about the helicopter parent. You know, I think it's in those times not taking the opportunity to process it with kids, right? And so if they're in a sport or, you know, whatever it is, if they're, you know, watching TV, I mean, it's really kind of understanding that thought process. And so if they fail with friends or if they act out, it's really sitting down and talking to them. And sometimes that's giving enough space for the tantrum or the tears or the emotionalness to decrease, and then coming back and talking about it. Because I think a lot of times what happens, because we're tired, because we got a lot going on, we're like, okay, crisis averted. You know, I told them what I wanted them to hear, so I'm going to go ahead and walk away. Well, when a kid, you know, is crying, they literally cannot manage their emotions. So they can't cognitively understand whatever lesson you're trying to teach them. So coming back later and saying, okay, so let's talk about this. You know, what's going on? And again, it's that thought process, right?
Yeah.
So the theme is the process. It's really focusing on that process. Okay, how can we do that different next time? And it's helping them and letting them, you know, if they fail again, letting them fail again and coming back and saying, okay, so we talked about this last time. What can we do different this time?
I love that you said that, because I found something. It's called the pocket problem solver method. Have you heard of that?
I have not.
So it's super cute. It's really for younger kids. But what you do is you use your 5 fingers to help you, and you hold up your thumb, and your thumb represents what was the problem. And then the next 3 fingers are, what 3 things could I have done differently? And then your pinky is, what are you going to do next time? So that's just a nice practical way for some of the younger kids to just think through the process. And what we're trying to do is build, what you were saying, those pathways in their brain, so that they can start to make these decisions on their own and, you know, kind of see cause and effect and things like that. So when we solve the problem for our kids, which sometimes is just easier and faster, we don't allow them to make those connections.
Right.
So, yeah.
I'm gonna use that in our marriage, babe.
What? The problem solving, the problem solver method, pocket problem solver.
Oh yeah. Next time we have a disagreement, I'm just gonna put up my thumb.
What was the problem?
That's right.
Then your next 3 fingers are.
Yeah.
What could you have done differently? You. I'm saying you, not me.
Me. Me. I'm the problem. Yeah. Okay.
And then your pinky is, what are you gonna do next time, Dave?
Right.
Well, I was just going to say, you know, so I think when you solve your kids' problems, then you're doing them a disservice.
Yeah.
You know, and it's completely taking them away the ability to succeed. And when you do solve the problem for them, the message that you're giving them is, you're right, you can't do this. You got to let me do it.
That's so good.
And so those are kind of those subliminal, or those, you know, more as caught than taught, right? And so I'm going to do this for you. And so there's already like an internal uncertainty in kiddos. And so when they say, oh, I can't do this, or when you go in and you save it or fix it for them, then you're like, you know what, son, you know what, daughter, you're right, you can do it. Let me go ahead and do it for you.
Oh.
Man, I wish we had another 30 minutes or so to just talk about that.
Yeah.
But
just drop that bomb.
I know, right?
Wow.
Well, so unfortunately we are out of time, but thank you, Jorge, so
welcome.
much for joining us. This was awesome. As always, right now we want to tell you what's going on with Noggin. So what's going on with Noggin Educational Coaching, Dave?
So, in light of the fact that we're getting through the end of the school year, and we are done with the grade books, this is a great opportunity to learn from what happened this past school year, learning from those mistakes. So Noggin, this is a great opportunity to begin to think about how can we go back and plug in and fix some of those areas of our lives academically that our children are struggling with, because they're not going to go away just because the new year begins. So we want to plug in those gaps. We want to help your child to discover what are those areas that I need to get better at and stronger at, so that when they come back into the school year in the fall, that they'll be ready. So if you're interested in finding out more about that, you can email me at david@noggineducation.com, and also you can reach us at 682-422-6855. You can also go to our website, noggineducation.com.
And the other thing is that we're looking for a school-dazed radio show intern. So if you know any awesome 15 to 21-year-old students in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex that would love to hang out with us on Tuesdays and also come to our office and do some planning for the shows, we would love to hear from you guys. So go to schooldazedShow.com and click on Summer Internship. So what's happening next week?
So next week, we welcome Andre Fields from Cedar Hill ISD. She has over 40 years of experience in education and will share with us about the state of public education.
Well, great. We're looking forward to that. So as always, head to our website, schooldazeshow.com, for more information. And remember, you do not ever have to miss a show. Find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play Music, Stitcher, and really any place that you listen to your favorite podcasts. And also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Noggin Foundation. And every week we share information about School Days Show. We share information about parenting as it relates to education. And so you don't want to miss any of those posts. And the last thing, we always want to tell you to head to our website, schooldazeshow.com. And the last thing is that David and I are parenting by grace. We depend on God to give us the wisdom and strength that we need to raise our kids into flourishing adults. And if you want to know more about that, email us at info@schooldazeshow.com. Have a great week.
School Days is sponsored by Noggin Educational Foundation. At Noggin, we provide free educational resources to students from low-income families and support to their parents like the preceding broadcast. School Days is made possible by the generosity of listeners just like you. Please consider donating to Noggin at Noggin, Noggin, foundation.org.